Thank you guys for braving the cold and the ice and the snow we've seen today as well to come down. First lecture is by Dr. James Intriligator from the School of Psychology, who won the Equality Champion Award at last year's Student-Led Teaching Awards. And the presentation he's giving is Out with the Old and In with the You, putting students at the heart of education. So, Dr. James Intriligator.
Thank you. Thanks. All right, well, oh, hey, my people are here. All right, well, welcome. Thanks for coming along. Let's see, where to begin? So what tonight's about? I guess I'm going to begin a little bit oddly. I guess many academics like to talk about themselves, and I'll start with that, but a very brief one. So in terms of my background, I actually started my life in computer science and electrical engineering, and then I switched pretty quickly to philosophy and logic, and finally ended up in psychology. I'm in the School of Psychology. I did my PhD and my postdoc work in psychology and neurology, things like that. And then I did about 4 years outside the world of academia doing research, well, not research, but basically work starting up think tanks, working on patents, innovations, high-tech stuff. And then at the end of that period, I sort of was a researcher. I had about 50-ish publications in a lot of different fields. I wandered around a bit, and I came to Bangor. And all that was fine, but you might then wonder how I went from being sort of a neuroscientist, technology guy to being a Student-Led Teaching Award nominee. I was actually nominated, I'm proud to say, I guess, in 3 different categories of Best Teacher, Most Innovative Teacher, and also in the Open category. And it was the Open category that I won for the oddest, perhaps, title, Equality and Liberation Champion. And it was very surreal, I must say, when I heard that I won in that category, because it's, you know, someone nominated me very kindly for that. And I was happy about it. I'm proud of the award, but I'm not really sure what to make of it. And I guess tonight I'm going to talk a bit about it. I've been asked to sort of share and inspire and talk about teaching. And I wish I could say I had a guiding philosophy, that I had sort of a vision, some kind of inspiration, some kind of idea from above, some kind of voice whispering to me about what I should be doing. But sadly, or maybe more truthfully, it wasn't like that. I wish I could say that it was evidence-based, that I looked around me and I sort of rationally saw that, well, what we need here is this. There's this gap in the market. We should design some innovative programs. But also, sadly, it really wasn't that. It's much more like an archaeological dig or a haphazard construction. I sort of just did what seemed right at the time, and I guess in a sense it was, it seemed to work in some sense. I guess it's a bit of a matter of now uncovering what was there. And so I guess tonight, in a way, is going to be a bit about that sort of uncovering what it was all about. Sort of a case study, archaeological dig into all of what I've been up to. And this is kind of the game plan of what I'm going to talk about tonight. It's a bit of a ramble. It's an archaeological dig and some case studies to uncover some threads. I think in the end, actually, it's been a useful exercise to put all of this together, because it turns out there were some threads, and I'm going to try to uncover some of the themes that ran throughout some of the random stuff I've been doing, and maybe at the end even offer some advice for what it's worth. And it all began, I guess I have to step back a bit, to when I first arrived here in Bangor, and back in 2003. And at the end of each academic year, one of the highlights, in a sense, of the year is that we get to listen to our third-year students give their dissertation presentations. And actually, I like it a lot. It's one of the few ways that we get to actually hear about what our colleagues are up to. But sadly, the first time I went, which was in 2003, I must say it was a little bit depressing, because the students, they did as best they could, but they really didn't have any experience. It was clear they hadn't really practiced their presentations much. Their presentations were not very friendly, user accessible, and they just didn't seem to have much passion for what they were talking about. And in addition to that, in addition to sort of the mode of presentation, it was also clear that they weren't that passionate about the topics. A lot of it was sort of traditional science, if you will. It was removed from their interests, removed from kind of their skills, from any place, from any sense of where they will go with their life. It was sort of just academic in the worst sense of the term, and removed from any kind of job prospects. It was like they were working down here in Weldon, and we were up in our ivory tower looking down on them and giving them assignments and giving them projects that really didn't resonate to where they wanted to go. And at the same time, it was my first year in a British university, and I was surprised that we actually had these things that were called 2Ts, and we were supposed to meet with them and talk to them, and they'd come and chat with us, and I didn't know any better, and I didn't realize I was only supposed to spend 5 minutes with each 2T, but I ended up spending 15, 20 minutes, half hour with them, and I had huge queues down the corridor, and my colleagues hated me. But anyway, I was surprised, because many of them were complaining that they were sort of sick of all the essay assignments they had to do. They were sick of having to follow APA format for all of their assignments, and they really wanted more choices. They felt like they were just being forced to jump through the same hoops over and over again. So I had these experiences of listening to the presentations, and I had these experiences of talking to the students and listening to what they were saying, and I realized that there were some problems here. And I decided that when the department came to me and asked me to make a third-year module, I decided I would try to sort of do things to change some of those things. And I decided that one thing I had to do in my third-year module was to sort of start teaching students how to present. They had to do it at the end of their third year, and it was actually a big part of their degree. It was worth, I forget what, I don't even know, I forget how it works. Anyway, it was worth a lot for them to make this little mini 10-minute presentation, and I felt bad we were assessing them on something that we hadn't really given them any practice or training in doing. So I decided as part of my module I should teach students how to present. I should also try to find ways to get them more engaged with the actual content of the course, and at the same time teach them some real-world skills, teach them things that would actually be useful beyond just the academic world of the university. And I wanted to find ways to give them choices as well, and to give them what I guess I call CV fodder, stuff to put on their CV. So many students finish their university careers with just very minimal information on the CV. I think, as an aside, that I think that's in a sense they haven't done a good job of spinning it. Many students don't realize that a final year project should be seen as, managed a year-long investigation, controlled all resources, orchestrated all blah, blah, blah. Anyway, but most students end up thinking that they don't have much to put on their CV. So I decided when I made my third year module that I should try to find ways to get all of those things in there. And I'll tell you a bit about how I did them. I'll kind of keep a little running score along the bottom to keep on top of what I'm talking about. So the first thing was the discussion sections. Most modules have discussion sections. I decided in mine, the discussion sections would all be built around having the students present stuff, and it's far too much detail for you to read here, but the basic idea was that students would come in, they'd all come walking in as little happy-faced people, and they get randomly put into little different groups, and there would be different TAs who'd then shepherd each of the groups, and essentially the students would then be given, they had been given in advance something to read, and they would then be given sort of an hour to work together with the rest of their group and try to put together a presentation. Now the nice thing about this, actually from my perspective, was I didn't have to ever force students to read the readings for the class, because if they hadn't read and they showed up, it would be their colleagues with whom they had to prepare a presentation that would be kind of disappointed. So the first time they'd show up, they hadn't read, let's say, the 3 papers, but they pretty quickly learned that there's a chance they'd have to present on any of those 3 papers, so they'd have to read all 3 just to hedge their bet. So it worked pretty well in that sense. And what happened was they'd get in their little groups, they'd have an hour to prepare a presentation that they would then make to the other students in that sort of cohort, so to speak. The nice thing about it was that it wasn't ever you in front of a big room of people presenting. It was sort of you and 3 or 4 other people presenting a case study to sort of a dozen other people. So some safety in numbers. And it was kind of a nice way to sort of move people towards the idea that it was okay to speak, that there were certain ways to do things. And in addition to that, we actually structured it so that the first week when they came in, the first discussion section, they'd have nothing to work with. They would just be sort of speaking to the group. The next week they were told they had to incorporate flip charts and pens and markers, and kind of that would be, we sort of over the weeks shaped it so that the next time they had to actually use a PowerPoint, and in the final time they had to use a PowerPoint and they had to have some interactive activity to involve the rest of the class. So over the course of the different weeks, we sort of were trying to shape the students to get better at presenting and more comfortable at presenting. So that was sort of how I addressed the teach them how to present side of things. And I think it worked pretty well. I had lots of students who've reported that it made it far easier to do their third year talks and things. I actually also give a little presentation, my presentation, where I present how to present to third year students, and they seem to like that as well. And I think it was actually, I guess, a year or 2 later that the School of Psychology started doing pops and things. So we actually now have sort of throughout the years other things. In a way, it's not required anymore in a weird way, because the School of Psychology sort of does it throughout the education, but it was kind of an example of the way that I think if you listen or you observe what's missing from students, you can spot things you could do. The other side of it all was my lectures, my third year lectures. In those, I wanted to make them somehow engaging. I didn't want students to be kind of sleeping in the lecture. I wanted them to be up there, excited and kind of engaged, running around the room and asking questions. So I actually have crafted my lectures in a way so that there's always sort of little mini in-class discussions. I'll say, okay, in the next 3 minutes, talk to the person next to you and discuss X or something. And at the end of that, I'll ask people to present what their partner had said, things like that. Anyway, it was kind of a way of getting people involved, and it worked pretty well. I find that somehow having these mini in-class discussions has broken down the barrier. Students are far more willing to raise their hand when I ask a random question to the room. The other side of it is I've been trying to sort of gamify, if you will, I hate the term, but it's a popular one now, to make my lectures more like a little interactive thing. And so there's a pretty active Facebook. This is something from actually last Friday. I posted a new challenge. I will occasionally, I guess about once a week, I'll put up things on the Facebook group saying, hey, here's a new thing, or I'll just ask, what's your favorite brand, things like that. And that seems to be working pretty well. I always get students kind of engaged in that sense. So that's kind of fun. And then for me, in a way, it's a bit of a cheat, but I can always use adverts. So my particular topic that I'm teaching is around consumer psychology. But again, there I decided that rather than just talk about the theory of consumer psychology, it was nice to actually show examples. And so I started using advertisements as a scientific tool, if you will. And I brought one of my favorite ads to show you just kind of for fun. The interesting thing about ads, I think, is kind of like the way a vision scientist will study optical illusions or visual illusions to understand how the brain works. I think by studying adverts, we can actually understand quite a bit about how human psychology works or how advertisers believe it works. So I'll show you this little ad, and as I do, try to pay attention to questions like, what are they doing to grab your attention? What have they done to kind of force you to be engaged with it? I'm going to turn off the lights so no one gets here. What have they done to kind of play with your memory, to build your emotional engagement, and to do things from a social perspective? So see what you think. Oh, no video. What a disaster. Hold on. Let me try one more time. I don't know why. Maybe the video projector thing isn't working. No.
Did you say you got your students to practice?
I did. I got them to practice. Believe it or not, I've practiced this, and it did work offline. Let's see. I'm going to try one last thing. Let's try this. I'm going to try. It may just be it doesn't like playing full screen. So let's see if I just play it here in the player. No. Huh. Well, either I can give it up. I'll give it up. It's a great ad, though. If I can find it at the end, I may come back to it. Anyway, it's just a little example. I use lots of adverts in the class to give examples of specific things in consumer psychology. And it doesn't really matter in a sense for this context. You guys don't care about consumer psychology. It's just an example of the kinds of things that I try to do, because then I get students to volunteer. Okay, raise your hand if you think it was a good ad, raise your hand if you think it was a bad ad. What do you think they were trying to do here? How did they play on emotion? So I would use them as kind of touchstones or discussion pieces to try to get students more engaged in the in-class discussion. Beyond just the kind of what happened in the classroom in the discussion section, I also try to give assignments that would give students some skills and some choices. So the one that has been, in a sense, most successful, if you will, has been these video making assignments, where I'll give the students the opportunity to kind of show me what they've learned and be creative and create essentially an advert that inspires me. And the assignment is to make an ad either for Bangor University or for any public good, if you will, or for really anything else. They just have to create an advert, and in the advert, they have to demonstrate a knowledge of consumer psychology. The interesting thing from my perspective is that I can't tell just from the advert how they've done it all. So there have been times where I've watched the ads just for fun, and for instance, I remember one year I saw an ad and I thought, oh, well, that's clearly a D. This student, she's just taken a video that she made for her friends, because it's kind of fun times at Bangor, and it's her and her friends hanging out. But then when I read the write-up, it was actually absolutely brilliant. It was insidious. She was trying to make it, she actually was kind of a loner, loser person who didn't have many friends, but she knew that when students were choosing a university, they wanted to choose a university where people had friends and did engage in. So she outlined very carefully the psychological mechanisms and why she did things the way she did. Every scene cut had been chosen specifically to get you to continue watching it, to believe that Bangor was an active place where you will have a vast social network. So it's kind of cool. Anyway, so their job is to make this thing, to go out and actually film it, to edit it, and to actually then submit both the film and the write-up of what psychological techniques they've done, etc. And it's kind of nice because, like it says at the bottom, it builds new skills. Most of them hadn't yet made videos, things like that. And it gives them all kinds of choices. They could do whatever they want. I have a feeling the ads won't work, but we'll try it anyway. So here's an example of one of the ads. This is one that was made for to try to sell Bangor University. Let's see what you think. Ooh. No. Just any. Also not working. Sorry. I don't know what's wrong with the video.
It's worth playing the audio though.
Oh, you just want the audio.
Well, I remember that video.
It is a good video.
Computer labs. These are state-of-the-art, psychology-specific computer labs with over 100 of the newest Apple Mac desktops, all with the latest in statistical technology and staff on hand to assist you with your every need. This isn't just any library. This is a collection of 7 comprehensive libraries, with extensive subject coverage jam-packed with the latest textbooks, journals, periodicals, and electronic resources.
I could put
This
your ad, yeah.
isn't just
Anyway, I'll cut it out. It's a good ad, and actually we did, of course, it was a bit self-serving. So we had students make these ads, and they're up on YouTube, and I think that ad has had, I don't remember the latest numbers, it's something like 10,000 views on YouTube. So it's worked pretty well. We've actually done a nice job of selling Bangor University. Others, this is another example actually. Oh, sorry, it skipped over the other example. Something's wrong with the video on this. Anyway, there was another example of a quit smoking ad that some students made. There have been some really brilliant ads that the students have made for either public good, quit smoking, or for even kind of local things. So there was a team last year that made a video that was trying to sell the American Football Club here at Bangor. So lots of variety. And the main thing there is I think that it lets students do something that they cared about. They had some choice over it that let them feel more engaged with the whole thing. So that worked pretty well. Another one that I often do, and I think this one also is not going to work, I'm sure, but it was to make a video or some kind of marketing material that would sell yourself to your next job. And here, partly it was about getting them to start thinking about what their next job will be. So they had to come up with a little write-up of what their ideal next job is, whether it was an academic one or a non-academic one. They had to come up with a description and to say what the psychological what people would be looking for in the ideal candidate for the next job, and then to create a piece of marketing material, whether a video or a write-up or even just a CV, that would sell them to that position. And I'm afraid the video won't work, which is too bad, because this one actually did get the student his next job. Let's see if it's going to work. No, it's very weird, isn't it? Somehow video's just not happy today. Anyway, all of those little techniques were ways that I tried to find to get students engaged, give them some choices, and get them thinking about their future and give them skills to kind of get them ready for that future. The other side of it all, that was all undergraduate. At the master's level, there were some other things that I noticed, which is when I first arrived here, we offered something called a Master's in Psychological Research with a specialism in consumer psychology. And it was an okay program, and they had to take all of their classes in the School of Psychology, all their modules there. And we had about between 6 and 8 students a year who took it. They weren't the best students. They weren't too bad. It was a mix. But in general, I realized from talking to the students that they actually just didn't like it much in a weird way. It wasn't exactly what they wanted. They were the wrong classes. They weren't the kinds of things that they wanted to learn about. It didn't really take them where they wanted to go. And so I sort of listened to that, and after a couple years realized that there was a much better option, which was that psychology had some classes and the business school had some classes, and instead what we should do is put them together and create a new program, which is this Master's in Consumer Psychology and Business. And the students were much happier. It let them choose modules in the School of Business and the School of Psychology, and it led to students who were more pleased with the variety and choices, and also from our perspective, led to far better students. They were students who, now we have about 40 students per year, and they tend to be great students. They're really students who've come from all over the world who've hunted down this program because it meets their needs, it gives them the job kind of skills they want, it lets them study what they want to study, learn what they want to learn, and kind of move them towards where they want to go in their career. And I think from a kind of philosophical perspective, I think that's an important aspect of education, is not just to put people on the same old track as everyone else, but to help them have a track that will take them where they want to go. So the students now are much happier. There's a picture of them from the Christmas party. Clearly a happy lot. Here's one more from the Christmas party with my son Theo leading the dance. Wild dancers. Anyway, it was a fun Christmas party. So in that, we do all kinds of things where, in general, the way we try to teach that is the first semester is all about the theory of consumer psychology. And one of the things we do there is we use blogs, which I have to thank Jess Martin. You'll hear from him, I think, on Wednesday. He's going to talk about innovations in teaching. And one of the things that we did was, taking a kind of a lead from Jess, we decided to use blogs. And I think they've been working incredibly well, especially at the master's level, because at this point, the students kind of have a good sense of where they want to go. So they either want to, for instance, last year we had a woman who was passionate about wine and selling wine and beverages in general. She had worked for Coors and Budweiser and Coca-Cola as well, so anything liquid that you consume. And so her blogs were all specifically about beverages. So it was about the influence of color on wine perception, how people choose wine, how people choose beer. It was all about that. And the nice thing about it is every week her blog was about that. She also created the look and feel, so they all sort of said wine. It was all kind of graphically very beverage focused. And interestingly, she had hundreds And some of our students actually this year have thousands of followers, thousands of people who are reading their blogs. They've sort of now branded themselves as experts in whatever it is. And it's something that it's not just a good learning experience, but for them it's really important for their CV as well. They now can aim any prospective employer at, oh, if you're interested in beverages, I actually have extensive background, go see my blog. It has 5,000 readers or something. So it's another kind of way in which I found that you can actually incorporate within the standard academic model things that can help students build new skills, give them lots of choice. They could choose whatever they want to do, and have good stuff for their CV. The other example of that at the master's level is I run a thing called Applied Consumer Psychology, where I get the students to work with local businesses and actually work on real problems. And it's partly informed by my belief that for some things, psychology being one of them, consumer psychology in particular, but actually I would say for most things, the only way to get really good at it is to just see lots of different examples. So like if you want to get good at, let's say, consumer psychology, you have to see dozens of different kinds of questions and problems and how they're addressed. And so in this applied consumer psychology module, I have the students work with a project, a problem, a company, but then they're also working in a team of other people, let's say 3 of them, and each of those people are working on a different aspect of the problem. So it might be, for example, they worked with Dimensions Health Food, the little food shop up on Upper Bangor, and one person looked at the atmospherics, so sort of the lighting, the color. One person worked on the psychology of shoppers versus non-shoppers and interviewed hundreds of people in the community to figure out why people went or didn't go there. And another person worked on the website for Dimensions Health Food. And it was a great learning experience for the students. They worked with the company. They had to kind of go in and interview them and figure out the psychological mechanisms that underpin all those things. And for any one student, let's say the one working on the website, she had to learn about atmospherics in a retail setting, and another person had to learn about psychology. At the same time, we had other students working on lots of other projects in the community. So the other belief is the case study method is a good way to learn, and I also believe it's important to work on local issues. So in other programs, let's say Stanford in their business school, they have you read classic case studies from around places, famous places. So Hewlett-Packard, how did they do at IBM? How did they do at Shell? I think it's much more interesting and kind of philosophically, morally better to work on actual real local problems. So over the last 3 years, these are some of that. In fact, that's not even all of the projects we worked on. But going back to the Dimensions example, so that year, when that student was working on Dimensions, at the same time, they had to know that there was another project group that was working with, the Menai Compost Project, a local social enterprise that was taking household waste and creating compost from it. And the interesting thing about it was not just that, let's say again, if I were working on Dimensions, I had to work with my other people, but I also each week would have to serve as the in-house consultant for one of the other projects. And so I would hear from Terrace Bar what they were working on and how they were doing heat mapping to track people as they shopped around the Terrace Cafe. And I would learn about different forms of data collecting. So again, from a student perspective, it provided many different examples. It let them each choose. So if you were a student who was interested in internet stuff, you would end up doing a website-related project. If you were interested in I'll give you some examples from this year. So these are the projects that we're running this year, and when I assign a student, actually the students get to choose which projects, but when I advise them, I sort of try to listen to them in terms of where they want to go with their life. So I have one student from Spain who's very interested in marketing ethical, kind of sustainable materials, so he's working now with the wool insulation company. It's a local company that takes sheep wool and makes it into household insulation, and he's trying to figure out how to sell that and what are the kind of barriers to selling that stuff to the community. Another student wants to work on automobiles, and he's working with Pentraith Automotive to help them figure out why people buy or don't buy and certain financing, things like that. Anyway, those are some of the projects. And again, I think it's not so much the specifics of it, but just the kind of ethos of trying to give people projects that are applied, give them some choice in the projects, and also giving them something for their CV. So in all of these cases, the students are able to put at the end of their master's degree that they did a master's dissertation on X, but they also worked with let's say Academy Nightclub to figure out why people do or don't come into Academy and help redesign the nightclub. So those are some examples. One other master's level kind of example is behavior change and nudge. It's a module that we now offer, and basically I started this module because I heard lots of students interested in nudge theory and understanding how behavior change happens. So I kind of created this nudge and behavior change module, And in a sense, it was kind of easy because we already had a lot of experts locally, and they came in and delivered it. And again, from a kind of a student experience perspective, I have the students actually come up with not just to study the theory, but to actually come up with a new intervention that they can roll out or that could be rolled out to make some difference in the world. So all of that is kind of the academic side of it, but I guess I'm also a believer in trying to get people involved in activities outside the official curriculum. And so over the years, I heard students, in fact, every year I have a couple students who volunteer in my lab. I have other students who come and want to know, what's it like to do consumer psychology or to be a clinical psychologist or whatever it is. And it's clear that students want more experience. They want more stuff on their CV. And they're kind of worried that the future is going to be difficult. It's going to be hard to find a job. And if they don't have the right skills, if they don't have the right stuff on the CV, they are worried that that's what the future will be like. Luckily, it's not that bad. There are jobs still out there. So over the last couple years, I've been involved in creating a bunch of different enterprise activities. And again, this is all outside the curriculum. It's stuff for students to do. And surprisingly, students actually show up. So students do want to get involved in stuff. So Enterprise by Design is one that we've been running where students kind of get together Thursday nights and they design a new product. This year it's with DMM, design some new climbing related product, and then they pitch it to a dragon's den full of people. And that's been going now, I guess this is our third or fourth year we've done it, and every year we have about 100 students go through. And again, they don't really get money or anything. They just come along because they want experience, they want something on their CV. I try to always help them sell it on their CV, selected to be part of an elite interdisciplinary program, blah, blah, blah. So these kind of extracurricular activities, I think, are vital, not just for the students, but also for if the university wants to have students who feel that it's a vibrant place. There should be lots of stuff like this happening. So anyway, that's one of the things that I guess one of my messages is that more of these kind of extracurricular activities are good. Last year, we ran something called the Social Enterprise Accelerator, where students came together with local social enterprises to kind of help make new social enterprises and accelerate them. And then this year, this is kind of fun, we're doing something Young Enterprise, it's called. It's actually a national scheme. And they've brought it now to universities. So we have a team this year that's making beer, essentially, or they're rebranding beer. They're buying white label beer and making University of Ales beer. That's their little logo. And it's going to be a posh ale. I think the first one is Thirst Degree? No, something like that. Thirst Degree. No. Honors Thirst, something cute like that. So anyway, it's another kind of enterprise activity. The other side of things that I kind of like, well, I don't really like, but it's good for the students, is getting involved in these competitions. So over the last couple of years, I've taken teams down to various places. This year, in fact, just 2 weeks ago, I took those 6 jokers, master's students, down to Cardiff to be in another one competition. And that team, the National Thrust, as they were called, they were one of the 3 finalists for the competition. They got to present down in the Senath building in Cardiff, which is kind of cool. And again, it's just good stuff for their experience, for their CV. I'm always surprised. I decide to try out things. I'll say, hey, anyone want to do X? I need someone to volunteer to get involved with this project, or would anyone want to come along for this? And they always seem to show up. And it just, I guess, suggests to me that there's a lot of desire to be involved and engaged in things. And I think often we forget that students are passionate learners, and whatever we suggest, they'll kind of go for. One of the other projects that I'm sort of part of nowadays is this enterprise hub with colleague Menai and Clindrillo. We're kind of creating this, I don't even know how to describe it. It's essentially a hub to try to bring a culture of enterprise and aspiration to the young people of North Wales. And this is something that I'm hoping will have more and more impact on Bangor University and the region as well, that kind of stuff. So I'm going to wrap up a bit. So like I said, it's a bit of an archaeological dig, and I think I've gone through a bunch of random case studies. And now the question is, were there any themes, and do I have any overall advice after I went through it all? And I guess the first one is to just essentially listen to your students. It sounds kind of ridiculous and perhaps even insulting to suggest that you wouldn't, but you'd be surprised if you start listening to what their ideas are. They often are far more creative, innovative, and inspiring than you might suspect. They often will have good ideas about what would engage them and people like them in modules. And of course, listen to your colleagues. People like Jess always have brilliant ideas, and it's inspiring to have them around, and it's nice to think about how to incorporate some of their ideas into your own work. And then, I think thinking about what your students really want is an important thing. In wearing my other hat of consumer psychology, there's a lot of, there's if you will, a sea change occurring now, where we're now in an era of mass customization, and it's really about trying to get everyone the specific customized product, whether it's a car or an iPod or an iPhone. Everyone wants their own product. They want their own uniquely designed product that they've been able to input into. So in fact, like prepare-at-home foods is one of the fastest growing categories because there people get to actually get engaged with creating their own little products. And I think education really, in a sense, is no different from that. It is, in a sense, a product service, it's hard to say, like any other, but no matter how you think of education as a product or as a service, I think the fact that people will want to customize it is still essential. And if you don't give people the choice, they will go elsewhere, in a sense. And not just thinking about what they want, but you should also think a bit about what they need. Many of us are a bit older than the typical first, second, or third year undergrad. Whoa! And we often have good senses of what it is that students need, whether it's presenting skills or writing skills. I should mention in the videos that I have the students make, I was always surprised at how good they were. I think the other side of it is that there is a cultural change, and students are not so brilliant at writing, but they're really brilliant at storytelling in the visual domain. So if you want to try to find ways to kind of pull out some of the best from students, I'd say give them options. Don't force them to write in a standard essay format. Maybe give them options to write a cartoonified version or something. And give students choice and give them opportunities to engage is the other kind of theme that I found has worked quite well. And basically just try to find ways to get them involved and active and give them experiences that will add to their CV fodder, give them experiences that they can put on their CV to summarize all the great stuff that they've been up to. And I guess that's all I have to say. So thank you very much. Thanks. I don't know if are there questions? Does anyone have questions? Oh, yes, Oliver.
Firstly, thank you so much, James, for describing what you've done. And I was going to make a long list of ways of singing your praises. But there is one way that I think I disagree with you, which is that argument about evidence base. I can't believe that effects like this, which are so powerful, haven't been pretty comprehensively demonstrated, that engagements of students in the learning process has got to make a difference. I forget, did you say earlier that there wasn't any evidence, or that you hadn't looked for the evidence?
I'm sure that there is evidence, and I'm sure Jess knows about evidence. And there's as you may, I assume you know that there's now we're trying to form a center for evidence-based learning and teaching here. And so I'm hoping that, along with others at Bangor, we're going to become one of the leaders to try to put together that evidence base. I think some of this stuff, I'm sure, has been evidenced in various domains, but I guess the idea of giving students choice and engagement is something that still has a lot of mileage in it, and I'm sure there's a lot more evidence still to be collected. I guess in my case, I didn't do any of it based on evidence. Well, Jess, I knew from his example that blogs worked, so in a sense I had that as my single data point evidence. Blogs work, so I tried that. But I guess for me, a lot of it is just about understanding what it is that I think the students want, what they say they want, and the other side of it is, I guess, suppose thinking about them as if they were people in an odd way, So I remember, shocking. I still remember on the nomination form that they showed when in the awards ceremony for the Equality and Liberation Champion. One of the things that the students said was that James Intriligator treats us as if we were people, which I thought was so ironic, that as if they were people, because they are actually people. But we sort of do tend to treat students as if they were sort of just people out there, not people like us people. And so I found that if you start thinking of them as people and try to treat them like people, it seems to make a difference as well. I should have looked more for the evidence, but I just did it based on a guess. Any other questions?
I have a second question. But I don't want to keep your reply. So if somebody else has a question, they should go instead of you.
Looks like it's just you.
So my question is, clearly, or intuitively, this is exactly the way that ideally we should all be structuring our teaching. Yet, most people are not. So what do you think the barriers are that are stopping our academics from engaging in the educational process in this way? I have a couple of ideas, but... Yeah,
I mean, I guess clearly, I'm sure we all agree as academics that one of the problems is it's just momentum, and it's more work to redesign a course than it is to just keep running it as you've always been running it. So I think partly there's that issue. and I'm guilty of that myself. Every year I think I really should change this aspect of the module, but I'd have to then change that aspect, and I have to redo this lecture, and I make small tweaks instead of major foundational changes. I think that's part of the problem, especially for lecturers who've been around for a long time. They already have developed the material, and it's kind of a lot of work to change it. I think there's another part of it is just sort of fear of the unknown. When we decided to try blogs, Jess said it worked. It worked with lots of third-year undergrads. I wasn't sure would master's students buy it. At that point, once you're a master's student, you might see through that we're just having you write. Is that really education? As a master's student, they might not buy it, but they did. So, I guess I've tried lots of random things. Facebook, call outs on Facebook. Hey, anyone have this? And every time I do it, I'm just a little bit nervous. Will anyone actually respond? Will they actually believe that this is education? Can I actually get away with showing 10 adverts in a lecture? But it does work, I think. So sometimes people are afraid of the unknown, and they're just not willing to give it a go. But surprisingly, it does seem to work pretty well. Students in the educational system are far more resilient than I think many of us would expect. I don't know, what other ideas did you have as to why?
I was going to ask you which nudges you were planning on using in order
to push colleagues?
That you move in that direction. It's a mentoring element, I think, that might be very helpful, sort of a buddy system.
Yeah. I've been shocked at how innovative and creative many of the other lecturers at the university are, and other schools as well. So we had this Academy of Teaching Fellows conference, and we each had to, many of you were there, we each had to choose sort of a session to go to, and so I happened to go to one on incorporating enterprise education in the curriculum or something, and there was a guy from biological sciences who described his module. It was just brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And I think one of the problems is I've already forgotten who he was, what he said, etc. But I still remember how he said it, and it seemed like a brilliant concept. One of the problems I have with the institution as a whole is just that we're never made aware of these things. I wish there were, here's a monthly teaching tip from Jess, or here's something cool going on over here. And part of it is just a lack of information sharing, which in this day and age of information abundance really shouldn't be a hindrance to us. And yet it's surprising that, I'm not even aware, it's not until the Board of Studies where people talked about this thing that Jess did with blogs that I was aware of what my own colleagues were doing. So I think that's one of the problems. I don't think we necessarily need to nudge them. It's just that we need to make them aware that there are these other options out there. So I think that would be one of the first nudge is just presenting the information and some of the options. Any last? Oh yes, at the back.
Would you see there was a role for staff development in doing that and supporting that transfer of knowledge to staff themselves?
Would I see it in what sense?
There was a role for staff development.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. I think that staff development, I think the students would be far happier and the staff would be far happier if they could just incorporate a little bit more of kind of some of these engaging activities and more, not even so much engaging because, I think there are many lecturers who are incredibly engaging, but just ways of getting students engaged in meaningful activities that mean something to the students. And I think that there's a huge opportunity there. Also, just being in Bangor, there's a huge opportunity to help the local community. So another little example is the Bangor Museum, or the Gwynedd Art Gallery, and has some complicated name, right by Subway in the middle of the arch. Most people don't even know where it is, sadly. Every year we've had some projects looking at it, but I recently, for various reasons, was talking to them about creating a new program with the university to try to get students to go to that museum, and they were quite keen to do it. The problem was just trying to find a way to get other staff members to be interested. And the idea was simply to create little competitions where you could say, for instance, in the month of June, there'll be a wall in the museum that's available to the Bangor Business School. And then in July, there'll be a wall of the museum that's open to archaeology in August. And so the museum was keen on this because, of course, it would bring students, get them engaged. And what I had suggested was that we could get other staff members, like in business, who they would just offer it up and say, hey, students in business school, we've been given a wall. We're looking for ideas. The first, we'll accept ideas until X date, and then we'll look for the top one. Whatever idea wins, you'll get to create your wall. So there's no money involved. You're not offering, there's no cost to the business school. It's just a way of sort of getting students engaged and getting the university engaged with the community. And it's odd because I will often suggest these things, but somehow staff are reluctant. And I'm not sure if it's a matter of educating staff or kind of developing staff, but I think there should be some way in which to nudge staff towards getting them a bit more open to some of these kind of radical ideas. I don't know. So yeah, I guess yes to staff development. How to do it is the hard part, and I don't know what to say to that one. Yes, at the back.
Do you think there's any implications in pushing these down to the A-level syllabus in schools?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I mean, especially with sort of colleague Menai, some of that work that I mentioned we're doing with Enterprise Hub, we've been thinking about pushing it down. Actually, we were just talking about this recently, how often in secondary schools they do things far more interesting and engaging than we do here at the university. And we were just discussing, is it a philosophical problem or a history? Like my son back there, he's at Friars nearby, and they recently were measuring the speed of sound, and they actually got the kids out onto the playing field and had them making sound, and other kids stop watching recording sound. And that's how to teach physics, and that's how to teach problem solving and stuff. And somehow we've grown to believe that at the university level it shouldn't be like that. It should be someone up here who's lecturing about the speed of sound and showing you equations. And I think the experiential side of learning is still alive at secondary and still a little bit alive at A-level, but somehow gets lost at university. So I don't even know if it's a matter of pushing it down to A-level or taking what's at A-level and pushing it up to university. Yes?
Well, I think what I hear most in my department is that there's an overall fear of spoon feeding.
Yeah.
How do you plan to address that particular fear? A lot of the older staff have come from a background where they were given a book and they were given a piece of paper and you had to learn it or you didn't learn it. And they're worried about making, training wheels for students now. How do you combat that?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's a good point. I mean, the fear of spoon feeding is one that is alive and well. And I guess my immediate response would be that we may. It's not that we're spoon feeding them kind of facts. It's instead that we're teaching skills about how to work with knowledge. So I guess in terms of education, there's a couple sides of it. You want to give people little bits of knowledge in there, but you also want to give them skills and kind of teach them how to work with that knowledge. And it's not that we're necessarily spoon-feeding the facts, but that we're instead creating systems where they'll have to get engaged in discovering the facts in a weird way. So, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, if in a sense, I would say that the old system of lecturing is far more spoon-feeding, right? It's saying, here's the content from the book, here's what chapter 1 says, here's the right answer for the test. Whereas if I show students a TV ad and I say, okay, what was that all about? It's not really spoon-feeding, it's kind of just creating new problems for them to solve. It's the same like when I used to teach sort of perception, vision, and attention. You spend a lot of time, you do have to spend some time understanding, sort of neuroanatomy, and here's how the brain works, and here's the bits of the brain, but you also then can show illusions and have people measure sort of how things work, and it's a different kind of teaching. So I would say that it could run the risk of being criticized as spoon-feeding knowledge, but it would be a misplaced criticism. It's really trying to teach skills instead of just convey knowledge. I don't know if that made sense. Oh yeah, at the back.
By doing the teaching method that you were just talking about, does that make it hard to empirically test it? Or are there ways that it can be tested that are different to what the testing strategy now?
Do you mean test the teaching or test the knowledge that the students have acquired?
Test the knowledge.
Yeah. That is a bit of a challenge. So, and it requires some creativity. I mean, I think that it's really not, my students might be surprised, but they shouldn't be when on the final exam there's a photograph of a magazine ad and it says, what is this all about? Well, it says a bit more than that, but I think that if you're going to engage in trying to teach this kind of knowledge, experiential-based skills, you should be ready to test in that same way. Students, it's a bit of a love it or hate it kind of attitude. In general, there's a bit of a reluctance to engage with that because I think students then realize that they have to, much like academics who don't want to engage with this, students have to engage with the unknown and be willing to say, okay, I don't know what that crazy Intriligator is going to throw at me, but I bet there's going to be some advert for something. And some students really don't like that because they would much rather know that if they understood this article and this particular kind of bit of knowledge, then they'll be fine for the test. And they don't like being tested for sort of skills. But I don't know, it does require a bit of a different form of testing. Yeah. I guess I should wrap it up. Well, thank you very much. That's it for me.